I love the PC Engine. And I love 2D shooters. So of course, I own both Gate of Thunder and Lords of Thunder, or Winds of Thunder as it was called in Japan. These were two heavy hitters that squeezed every ounce of technological strength from the PC Engine CD's processor, and, thankfully, were just as impressive in the gameplay department, unlike some other games that will go unnamed. Sapphire! Both were horizontal shooters developed by Red, who also gave us the Bonk series, but they were very different games in both presentation and playstyle. Despite their similar names, one is not a sequel to the other. Is one better than the other? Opinions are split, so in this video I'd like to do a detailed comparison of Gate of Thunder and Lords of Thunder, and find out whether or not there is a definitive king of PC Engine shooters. First, the obvious stuff. Graphics. Gate of Thunder has you flying a superpowered spaceship through cybernetic cities and corridors. There are a couple outdoorish sections, but largely it has a technological theme. It can definitely push some big sprites, as the very first level has a huge warship that appears above you and throws all kinds of enemy ships at you before you can get past it. The little details of all the machines you'll face off against are highly impressive, although you probably won't be able to take most of them in while you're fighting to stay alive. The color palette stays within the confines of the game's worldview. Things aren't overly colorful. Most of the bosses are just standard mechs, although I found the design and animation of the boss in Stage 5 to stand out above the others. There's also extremely little slowdown. The developers clearly didn't half-ass this. Lords of Thunder has you controlling a flying knight as opposed to a ship, and it's amazing how something as small as this can shoot the awesomeness factor sky high. This game lets you know right off the bat it can handle big sprites. Right from the beginning of the first level, you're met with huge sandworms and an enormous multi-jointed dragon that would probably cause the SNES to have a heart attack. Locales range from mystical caverns to castles to volcanic mountain ranges, and the use of color is truly stunning. To this day, every time I see it, I can't believe it's happening on the PC Engine. Lords of Thunder very likely has the best graphics ever seen on the console. Only Castlevania can come close to challenging it. The only drawback is that, in comparison to the beautiful artwork, the bosses don't animate much, and when they do, it's stiff. Gate of Thunder has sci-fi artwork, while Lords of Thunder went the fantasy route. Some people may have an affinity for one over the other, but I don't think I'm falling victim to bias when I say that Lords of Thunder was able to overtake its predecessor in the graphics department. Next up, weapons and items. Gate of Thunder gives you 3 different weapons that you can switch between with the second button, once you've picked up at least one item for that weapon type. A straightforward shot which powers up to a laser, a wave beam, and napalm that shoots vertically. You can also get a sub-weapon, a homing missile that becomes faster as you pick up more of the item. Picking up a weapon item for a weapon that's already fully powered up will send a wave across the screen that clears enemies, the closest thing this game has to a bomb. While none of your weapons shoot backwards, you can double tap the shot button to make your options turn around and shoot backwards, and again to bring them back forward. It's a little confusing in the heat of the moment. This is a single hit death game, and dying once will lose you the weapon you were using at the moment, along with your options, so even taking damage once is a pretty serious downgrade in power. Thankfully, weapon items appear relatively frequently in this game, and even more thankfully, there are shield items that will take 3 hits for you before disappearing. Lords of Thunder gives you the choice of 4 different types of armor at the beginning of each level, which all have a different type of weapon. Fire armor adds a fire snake similar to the fire weapon in the Star Soldier games. Earth armor adds fire bombs that drop down. Wind armor gives you a wide spread shot, and water armor shoots in 4 directions. The water armor is the only one that shoots behind you, and there are plenty of enemies that come up from behind, so this is generally my go-to weapon. You can pick up power-up items left behind by enemies, or you can buy them between levels at the shop with the money you've earned in-game. Taking a hit will bring your weapon power down as well as your life, and you'll probably take some damage during boss fights, so it's nice to be able to power up your weapon full after each level. You can also buy single-use bombs at the shop, which act slightly differently depending on what armor you're wearing, although I've found the effectiveness of these to be limited. Finally, a very important tactic in Lords of Thunder is the close-range sword. If you get close enough to an enemy, you'll automatically start slashing with a sword, which delivers much more damage than your usual weapon. But of course, by getting close enough to use the sword, you put yourself at a much higher risk of taking damage, so differentiating when to use the shot and the sword is a big key to the game. You can't say for certain that one game's weapon system is better than the other. Lords of Thunder gives you a bit more variety, but Gate of Thunder lets you change weapons on the fly. This one is up to the individual's tastes. Now, for the single most important part of game design, the music! The soundtrack to Gate of Thunder was composed by Nick Wood, a renowned musician who had worked with Duran Duran, although there are some Japanese names for music direction in the credits, so it's hard to say who did what exactly. The songs are basically video gamey synth rock, and of course, the CD sound quality of the PC Engine shines through. The percussion is crisp, and the songs are melodic but mechanical at the same time. Any fan of PC Engine music should love it. Assuming there are still some people on this earth who aren't acquainted with the Lords of Thunder soundtrack, do yourself a favor and go listen to a song or two right now. But make sure you've got plenty of space to air guitar. Lords of Thunder features tracks that could basically be called hard J-metal with the lyrics dropped, and man, is it one hell of a ride. The guitars are probably synthed, but you can barely tell most of the time, and some of the solos definitely sound like they were played on a real guitar. To put it simply, this is some of the best rock music ever written for a video game. The soundtrack to Lords of Thunder is the stuff legends are made of. Music preference is a very subjective thing, and some people may actually prefer the music in Gate of Thunder, as it does technically have more variety in sound development. But as far as I'm concerned, the tracks in Lords of Thunder are much more memorable. And yes, I was kidding about music being the most important part of a game. Last, let's look at the gameplay. Gate of Thunder is one of those games where you're cruising along, blasting everything down with no problem, and then some new enemy shows up you've never seen before and shoots a laser at you at light speed. It was developed by people who had worked at Technosoft, so this isn't all that surprising. Basically, Gate of Thunder expects you to memorize bullet patterns wholesale. They're much too fast to avoid if you're positioned wrong when they start. Some people may enjoy this, and others may find it to be unamusing. It also generally keeps you in a confined space. Few levels allow you to fly on all areas of the screen. It has what I call twitch gameplay. You have a very small space to make very precise movements. But once you know what to expect from those enemies with super fast lasers, Gate of Thunder is rather easy on normal mode. The boss fights are truly satisfying though. You'll have to memorize some things, but they still require consistently timed dodging once you do. Possibly the biggest downfall with the game should have been one of its biggest strengths: the super detailed backgrounds. It's often hard to tell what will damage your ship and what won't. For example, don't drop down too far on the first boss because the ground is actually part of the foreground and will damage your ship. But again, once you've seen it, it's no longer a problem. Lords of Thunder constantly throws tons of minor enemies at you from all angles. You'll be flying all over the screen for the entire level. It's actually kind of overwhelming. Even veteran gamers will start to get sore thumbs after level 1. But most levels have a lot of open space. It's a huge contrast to the claustrophobia-inducing level design of Gate of Thunder. Also, you can touch the ground and other things in the backdrop without punishment this time, resulting in much more hectic feeling gameplay. You'll probably try to use the sword whenever possible, since it's so much stronger than the standard shot, but the hit detection is a little sloppy for a game that expects you to get so close to enemies so frequently. Basically, Lords of Thunder is a game of endurance. It's a matter of killing enough enemies fast enough to keep yourself from getting too closed in. And it's fun as hell. My biggest complaint with Lords of Thunder is the boss fights. They're total memorization fests, and it's pretty much impossible to avoid some patterns on your first play. That, and the fact that you don't really have a moment of invincibility after taking damage, meaning you can have your health and weapon meters chopped down in the blink of an eye. Thank God for that shop in between levels. I have a confession to make. Before making this video, I thought that Lords of Thunder was an outright better shooter than Gate of Thunder. But after playing them back to back and really looking closely, I can honestly say that one isn't objectively better than the other. They have hugely different play styles, and I prefer the open, aggressive style that Lords of Thunder calls for. But if a person said they preferred the tense, precise gameplay style of Gate of Thunder, I could respect that. In short, I won't be selling either one anytime soon. That brings this face-off between two legendary shooters to a close. Thanks for checking out the video. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe, and I don't care what anybody says, Sapphire does suck! See you next time.